This is the final word story time, 226. Adam Collins with you, Daniel Norcross with me, exactly where you left us a couple of days ago, underneath the Jardine Portrait, your sofa in South London, a place where many episodes of the final word have been recorded across the journey. The 226th time we've convened to tell you the stories of the game through the numbers that you send in. What a time to be alive. Daniel, does 226, does anything jump out at you? Is there anything special that
well, it
clicks?
Did. It did. Something, and I couldn't work out, I couldn't remember it, because you know what it's like, the brain, it's got just too many numbers going on. But I think we have established that what I must have been thinking about was Jonathan Trott's 226. John, and what an innings that will have been. I mean, a lot of scratching. He'd have dug an entire trench.
Yeah. The Mariana Trench.
Yep. What a player he was, Jonathan. He's a strange thing, isn't it, Jonathan Trott's career? Sort of like bursts on the scene. Do you remember people thought that Mark Ramprakash might have played in that test, his debut test?
In 2009?
Yeah.
I didn't know obviously Ramprakash's career was still as prolific as ever then, but I didn't know that he was like
last
being
game.
talked of.
Well, it's because it was the last game of the Ashes. He came in for the game at
I know,
at the Oval.
I'm well aware of the circumstances. So, I didn't know that Ramps was...
Yeah, well, because...
His previous test would have been such a long time earlier.
It had been, but he was in that incredible stretch for Surrey when he was just scoring absurd numbers of runs. And he's actually only the one of two Surrey batters to have scored over 5,000 runs at the Oval in the 21st century. Rory Burns having got there the other day.
Got it, yep.
Ramps still has more. And in what was quite a short career, really, at the Oval, when you think about it, in a way, because split career half and half. So the talk was, for the one-off test, at the Oval, his then home ground, in prolific form, we're not bringing you back for any long period of time, but let's get him in here to do this job, to seal the Ashes, get England over the line.
The road less travelled, imagine that. Because, of course, he made 100 against Australia in the corresponding test in 2001, did he not, in a losing effort?
I think so.
Which would have been the last Ashes test that he played, I reckon. He didn't play in 02-03, did he?
Yeah,
certainly didn't play in 05 and didn't go in 06-07. There you go, Mark Ramprakash.
So it could have been him. Instead, Jonathan Trott got 100 on debut, and from that Test match, have you mentioned this on Story Time before? He was run out. Do you remember? Short leg, hit short leg, shouldn't flick back.
Was it Cat? No,
it might have been. But George de Bell tells a great story of going around to his house when he was helping him write his autobiography, and you go through the door. And there's a gigantic picture that his wife has erected, photograph of him being run out in his first test. It's like,
of all the moments.
Nail your feet to the floor, son. Don't you get too big for your boots. This is what cricket can do to you.
There's some other quite big names with 226, by the way. The biggest of them all. And the DG Bradman made a 226 at Brisbane against South Africa in 1931. There's a Sobers, two of the biggest.
Yeah.
Two of the Wisden Five of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And there's a Greenwich, there's a Lara.
Greenwich, you say?
Yes.
Well, we may be hearing a little bit more about Greenwich later
I remember that too, that at Bridgetown in 1991. The Lara at Adelaide in 05, another one I recall. A KP, speaking of the Oval and Ashes Test matches, that was against the Windies at Leeds. Neil McKenzie, Jonathan Trott as a rally, which I don't remember that innings. And Joe Root, of course, a few years ago now, in that test that I think it's still going at Hamilton.
Well, Jofra Archer's still bowling in it. He's coming in for his 1,015th over.
So with all of that said, I should remind you that Story Time, and indeed every show that we make on the Final Word feed, through seasons 18 and now 19. Well, 19 will be the next season, but is by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. We'll tell you a bit more about them in the middle of the program, and we will gallop along to our first number of the day. Now, this is Nerd Pledge. This is where you send through a number that corresponds with something crickety, and we sleuth what it is, or we try and work out what your number is pointing towards. That is your patron pledge. When your number is up in the queue, you come through to us and our team. We work out what you're probably talking about. Then someone like Daniel or myself or Jeff or Bharat Sundaresan or recently Cam Ponsonby or many others will then text Andy Zaltzman and find out what you're referring to, as Daniel often does, or others who help. Andrew Sampson, another regular. Mate, what do you reckon?
There's an industrial complex out there of people chasing around, running around. I mean, we're just We're merely the final conduit of the story.
Yeah. First up today, Brendan Crabb, who's been with us a long time. He's pledged 412. Now, the clue for you, Daniel, an amusing character in an otherwise unremarkable television show is mocked for his love of cricket. And it's fair to say it was much less popular than Friends. Now, I saw this and I thought, well, might this be a spin-off of Friends? Then I thought, well, in the past when we've done television stuff, it's often come back to Sorkin things. Like there's quite a strong through line of West Wing cricket references, which we've talked about on Storytime in the past. But it sounds like you're going elsewhere. All yours.
Well, I'm going to come back to it, but I've got to tell you that Storytime has been responsible for a fair bit of PTSD in my time. I've still not properly recovered from the Ed Giddins episode.
The Christmas trees.
Yeah. Oh my good God! The pair of spectacles, page 1187 or whatever it was in Wisden.
That was one of the more remarkable gets, where you were directed to a page in the Wisden Cricketers Almanac,
and it wasn't in fact the answer.
No, that's right.
It was coincidentally connected to the correct answer. Yeah. I mean, geez. Yeah. So. The next bit of PTSD I've had, well, I've had a few since then, but the one I've had in this episode is having to watch an episode of this programme that Brendan has talked about. So,
which programme are we going to?
Well, let me come to it just after I tell you my perambulations first. Okay. So that's down the line. This is me with PTSD. So having watched the episode of this programme, and I can now, I'm pretty sure, with absolute certainty say that we've got the right answer.
Oh, right.
But before we get to the right answer, let me just give you a little bit of the old inner workings, because on Storytime we like to look at the 412s in this world, don't we?
Yes, we do.
So, 412, Mickey Stewart, 412th player to play for England.
Oh, that's a nice one.
Very nice.
Given
indeed.
that we sit opposite the Mickey Stewart Pavilion. I don't know if you're on air with me this week at Surrey. I don't think you were. There's one pitch at Surrey I love them playing on, and they were there this week. And it's the pitch, the test pitch at the Oval is deceptively away from the pavilion, which never really pleased me with the way my brain is wired. I wanted it to be smack bang, as it would be at other grounds, such as Lord's, for instance. But at the Oval, but you do get one game per year where the 22 yards in the middle sort of
lines up.
It lines up with between Stewart and Members. So it's the Mickey Stewart Members Pavilion, and it's right down the middle.
Lovely.
And that's where Surrey played against Somerset last week, and all the way through I was looking at it fondly. Play more cricket on that pitch and you'll keep me happy.
Well, Mickey Stewart is England cat 412. The 412th Test match to be played was 1955. It was at the Oval. Surrey. It was pretty bad. It was Surrey dominated. England played against South Africa. It was in the middle of Surrey's string of 7 consecutive wins, 8 out of 9. And to the fore, of course, and selected almost certainly for that engagement at the Oval, Laker and Lock. Laker and Lock spun England to a convincing victory against South Africa. Peter May got some runs as well. It was Surrey dominated, that Test match. But as you know, I'm a very spiritual man, Colo. So what I like to do every now and then is I like to educate our listeners in the ways of the good book.
Okay.
Right. The Bible.
Our good book.
Our good book. So what I look at sometimes with 412, is there a chapter 41 verse 2? Is there a chapter 4 verse 12?
Laws of the game.
Proverbs.
Right, that good book.
That good book.
Not
the Bible.
I reckon if you went to Law
41, 40, you'd find something there too, but no.
Well, you tell me about the Bible and I'll tell you about the laws. How's that?
So I went to the Bible.
Okay.
As I so often do. I went to Proverbs, because Proverbs is a rich source of metaphor. Right?
Okay.
And if you look at Proverbs chapter 4, verse 12, you get the following. When you walk, your steps will not be hampered. When you run, you will not stumble. I can't think of a more cricketingly perfect proverb than that.
Yeah, it feels like when I'm taking Peggy home from nursery, and because she's fearless, she is sprinting down the hill, and I'm like, you're going to smash your teeth. But she never does, because the second part of that sentence
because when she runs, she will not stumble.
She will not stumble.
So I've got 2 bits of cricket in there, haven't I? Now I've got the walking and I've got the running. Now, walking, you're never too sure about walkers. There's no stats on walking because cricketers cannot be trusted. Adam Gilchrist, famous walker. He probably could be trusted, but then that's the nature of the beast. Colin Cowdrey, famous walker, definitely couldn't be trusted. Absolutely, definitely couldn't. He walked when he edged it to first slip so that when he got a thin nick through to the keeper, he could stay put. I'm pretty damn sure of it. You can't libel the dead. So it's worth a little drive-by, but there's no stats I can get on it. But I can get stats on when you run, you will not stumble. So my brain's churning around. I'm going, Zoltzman. I asked him, can you get me the most number of innings in which somebody has played Test cricket, and indeed first-class cricket, and not been run out?
Oh, good one.
When you run, you will not stumble.
When you run, you will not stumble.
So, let me run a few. Let's have a short quiz. We don't want to be here all day.
Okay.
Short quiz. Most Test dismissals without being run out. So this is the whole career. Yep. This isn't consecutive. Somebody's played 250 innings, but between innings 3 and 200. This is
from day dot.
This is from day dot to end of career. Who has gone an entire career? The most number of dismissals. This is not innings, so don't at me on this. This is it's dismissals. How many dismissals without ever being run out?
Wow.
Top of the tree. Have a little guess.
Give me an era or something. Give me something to work with.
Yeah. I'll give you late 70s through to early 90s.
Graham Gooch.
No.
Mike Gatting.
169 is the number of dismissals.
I think 169. I think Stuart Broad, but it's not that obviously. No. 169. Late 70s.
All rounder.
Early, not Imran, because Imran's finished by then. Might be Capel at a push.
Capel Dev has the record for the most Test dismissals without being run out.
Really?
169.
And there's a link to Zoltz with Capel as well, of course, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Because he was at Tunbridge Wells watching
the
107, the famous hit 175. Zoltz, when as a little boy, was taken. Am I right in saying it was the first day of?
But it was the World Cup.
No, sure, but was it like also? Did it also happen to be the first day of
holiday or something?
First day of cricket that he's seen live or something? It's something absurd.
And India are playing at Tunbridge Wells
against Zimbabwe. I had them 25 for 5 and all of that.
As Harold Pinter didn't say, I saw India at Tunbridge Wells another time.
We're playing against Pinter's team, against Gaieties. We've got a fixture against them at some point. They were netting next to us at Lords, and being the clever sort of club chairman that I am, I'm like, you guys play against the authors, don't you? Maybe you should play against us as well, ODB. And one thing led to another. I don't think I can actually play that day, but we have got a game against them at your old dung heap at Elaine's, our beautiful Elaine's ground at some point through the summer.
With the railway bridge.
Yeah.
So Capel Dev's number 1 at 169. I'll run you through the top 10 very quickly. Number 2 came as a surprise to me. Johnny Bairstow. 166 times he was dismissed in Test cricket, never run out.
100 of them were bowled or leg before.
That's why. He did get the chance.
Johnny, but there was a certain method to his dismissals.
There was a time towards near the end of his Test career, and it was a crazy stat. He averaged something like 8 against the straight ball.
I think that's a deceptive stat, and so you see that often in Test matches where they'll say only 4% of balls are hitting the stumps, and often teams don't like that. So we're not trying to necessarily with our big quicks. We're trying to, if a ball's hitting the stumps, good as gold, but we know that we're more likely to anyway.
But if you're bowling at Johnny Bairstow,
you bowl straight. You say things like, as the fielding team, stump to stump, boys, here we're a massive fucking show.
Exactly.
Stump to stump, boys, we're a massive fucking show. And you see what happens next.
You do. I guess part of the reason he wasn't run out is because he's actually a bloody good runner and very, very quick.
That's true.
Tom Latham's in at 152 innings, and counting. So he's in with a shout. He only needs to go another 18 innings without getting run out in Test cricket to take the record. Chandimal at 143, Hick 108, Madassan Nazar 108, Collingwood 105, Peter May 97, Richie Benno 90 dismissals, never run out. Great cricketing brain. And Ramiz Raja, 89.
So when you think about players that had 90 innings, or sort of 52 Test matches, 90 innings in Bradman's case, wasn't it? That was and then the not out. I think he was run out once, wasn't he? No, he had dismissals, right? But he was run out once with the Pud Thurlow debacle.
Yes, right.
In Adelaide on 299.
So that's a record you're not getting, Don.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And it's too late now. Now, so obviously, when one asks a question like that, one's obviously going to ask the flip side question. Who did stumble?
Yeah.
Who did stumble? So for 100 dismissals in tests, the highest run-out percentage...
Indi?
Amazingly not.
Okay.
We think of that.
Robert Linda makes us think that because of the wonderful compilation.
I don't think you're going to get it.
Okay. 100 innings. So
It's a Sri Lankan.
Not Arjuna Ranatunga.
No, he's only one of the most underrated batters. One that you actually slips through, not quite, slips through the net.
Not Mavanata Patu. Same era though.
And also Sam.
Oh gosh, that's Sam.
Samarawira.
Samarawira. Right.
Samarawira.
His record is.
It's an incredible record, and he never gets in the conversation. We talk about Giles Wardner and then Sagakara, etc. He was out 11 times. He was run out and 112 dismissals at 9.8%. That is the most for anyone with 100 dismissals in tests.
A lot. That's once a long series.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
Perori next with 8 out of 109. Gary Sobers was run out 10 times.
Perore was once dismissed in an international when he was bounced by Brett Lee, hit in the helmet. The helmet landed on the stumps. So, having his woodwork interfered with is, in unusual ways, a thing.
Adam Perore, yes. Gary Sobers, 10 out of 139. Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Quite a lot. And Matthew Hayden, 7%. He's number 4 in the list, 12 out of 170. Just a little sidebar. One man who would have won this record by an absolute mile is former England captain Alistair Cook, who was run out only once in 275 dismissals, 291 innings. And do you remember how he was run out?
Well, he could have been run out a million times at the non-striker's end, which is why the ICC had to change the playing conditions, because he was like a foot out of his crease, if not more, every ball that he...
well, he was run out at the non-striker's end, but...
off the fingertips of...
No, it was a throw that came in and he jumped up in the air to avoid it.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember at Kolkata in 2012?
I do, only faintly, but I do remember that was the mode of dismissal where he... Because he... Yes, that's right. Because isn't there something else with him? I'm trying to think about run-outs and him. Oh, that's what I was going to say. It was the overthrows. The 100 at the Oval in 2010, and as you so wonderfully called when he reached his final, which we played on the pod only a few weeks ago. We played that out, that piece of commentary, when you knew immediately, because you do the work, you do the prep, you do the bits that you need to do as a commentator. You are able to reach for that bit at that crucial moment that others may not be able to sort of reach for, because they rock up at the game and turn their headset on, turn the microphone on, and trust their natural, whatever. You don't do that. I love that.
Well, you try to put the effort in, don't you? Anyway, it popped in and it got there in the right way. But he was then, according to results, it was around about his 190th innings, that one.
Right.
So. Had he quit before that game, he'd have the record. Had he not jumped up in the air, he'd have possibly an unsurpassable 291 innings, 275 innings dismissals without being out. And finally, on the run-outs, because we'll get back to the meat of the question in a moment.
Yeah, sure. Got time.
The most first-class innings without being dismissed ever in first-class cricket, run-out, Stephen Mullaney. 305 innings, 292 dismissals. And that was his first-class career. So it just gives you an idea of the towering achievement of Cook's Test career.
Yeah.
It was 291 innings, 275 dismissals. So,
Walk that run. Good song.
Walk, don't run.
Okay.
So that's my little perambulation.
And I'm just going to tell you to round out.
Okay.
41.2, law of the game, is unfair actions. The umpire shall be the sole judges of fair and unfair play. If an umpire considers that any action by a player not covered in the laws is unfair, she shall call and signal dead ball, if appropriate, as soon as it becomes clear that the call will not disadvantage the non-offending side, and report the matter to the other umpire. So then there's a range of things they can do, leading to 5 penalty runs and that type of thing.
Okay.
And reporting to executives and governing bodies and so on, if I suppose a side continue to behave unfairly according to the umpires. There you go.
41.2.
41.2.
So we've covered...
Back to the TV show.
We've covered everything except what the actual answer is here. But that's because I now have to tell you, dear listener, that I, in preparation for this, watched 20 minutes of a programme. It was a whole episode called Rules of Engagement.
Okay. What era was this?
Well, do you know, it's hard for me to tell. I want to say like mid-ooze. Check it out.
I'll Wikipedia
I was so
it.
traumatised by it, I couldn't bear... to do more of it. It's one of these American sitcoms where they have very few sets. They do have a diner, like Seinfeld, but Seinfeld is the king of sitcoms and cannot be improved. In this episode, there is a recurring character who was also a recurring character in Seinfeld, the guy who played Puddy, who was the really dumb boyfriend of Elaine for some time.
Was that played by David Spade, who I see is now in the... By chance? He was in lots of things, wasn't he? David Spade was in...
No, not David Spade, although he is in this episode. It's played by somebody kind of big and bulky.
Okay, well, let's not worry about it. Let's not go through the IMDb of this show. It sounds like it's probably not much chop.
But it's
7 seasons, 100 episodes.
I know. I could see why it was popular. It's kind of like easy and strange. And this whole episode seems to revolve a lot around, and this is where I can see how you might get into the programme if you're a man of a certain type. Massively oversexed American women in their 30s who seem to take a shine to men of a conventional attractiveness and quite openly express their desire to root them.
All right.
And which is fine. It's lovely. And they were, everyone could act. There's a whole bunch of sort of lazy sexist stereotypes in it. In one of them, one of the sort of sidebar plots is that one of the main characters wants to get a massage from her boyfriend, but the boyfriend's incapable of massaging her for more than about 4 seconds before getting horny. And so then, in that classic American way, she is firm and demands that he do this for her, and then he sort of performs most extraordinary massage, seems to involve breaking her back and limbs, and then she gets horny and demands to have sex, which had its own moments of enjoyable farce.
Is this episode 12 of season 4?
It's episode 4, episode 12,
this is in
season
this
4. Yeah, all of this. Yeah, it's very dense text.
It's a busy show.
There's a shitload takes place in it.
Yeah, right.
But I think the bit that Brendan is most interested in is, and this is one of these classic American things where they don't understand accents, Americans, that aren't American. I think they're fundamentally uncurious people. So, like...
No.
So you know how Daphne in Frasier talks with a Lancastrian accent,
yes,
but her brother has a Cockney accent, and you're going, guys, this is ridiculous.
I've always found the Crane brothers' accents slightly preposterous in that show as well. Like, they're not American accents, are they?
No, but they don't pretend, American, aren't they?
But they don't pretend that they're British. Yeah, they kind of sound British in their own way.
Yes, they do. And there's something about Americans who, like, if they want to aggrandise class, will frequently step into an ersatz English accent, I find, which is very sweet, because basically everybody in England is either a Cockney villain or very posh. And if they're very posh, they might be very sinister as well. But they're always strangely sexy to American women. So, look, there's another perambulation around what goes on in the American mind.
Fine.
But there is a main character in it called Timmy, who is a brown man who loves cricket, and they seem to think he's South African. I can't for the life of me work out how he can be South African, because his accent is English.
So you say his name's Timmy?
Timmy.
I'm going to try and find it. Here we go.
Timmy.
Right, so Timmy is, fast-talking, eternal optimist when it comes to women, often ignoring multiple sexual harassment lawsuits levelled against him.
Oh, hang on. Maybe that's a different...
Oh, that's Russell. Sorry, Russell's the fast-talking.
Yes, that'd be Russell. Yeah, Timmy's a kind of
here we go.
spot.
Timmy is a recurring season 3 regular character thereafter, whom Russell hires as his assistant. Okay, he's a mild-mannered man with a quick wit, often matching Russell's jabs in their verbal sparring. Although he's fluent in 7 languages. 7 languages. He's performing as his assistant. What doing? And holds an MBA from the University of Oxford. He's a London of you. Timmy is often forced to do the menial work or to solve Russell's trivial problems. While many of Russell's schemes disgust him, Timmy will often see them through so that he can enjoy Russell's comeuppance. He plays cricket, makes the Wikipedia page, and he's also an avid fan of the Boston Bruins. In the season finale, Timmy's work visa expires and he faces deportation. What a cheery end. Russell sets aside his womanising ways to marry Timmy, so that he can stay in the country. Russell marries Timmy.
Oh, well, that's a turn up.
I didn't
Maybe I need to keep watching this show, It's one of those ones where it goes diddly-bong-bong, and then you go to another scene, and then there's 3 wisecracks, and it goes diddly-bong-bong.
So Friends, that might be the Friends reference, or is there a Friends connection that you've set?
I don't think there is really, but it's Friends adjacent. You can feel it. They go to
find it
diners.
interesting when people, a big part of their personality is liking Friends. I'm always kind of a little bit, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you would...
I'm Seinfeld. It's like, you know how people used to have like Blur and Oasis?
Yeah.
I'm very much Seinfeld, not Friends.
Look, it's more that, like, when you like a show too much, there's usually a reason for it. But that particular program, like, it is pretty fucking vanilla, isn't it?
It's pretty
vanilla, Friends. There are some very quotable quotes and shit. It's pretty straighty 180, right?
Yeah, I would have said so. Yeah, very much so.
Anyway.
And preposterous, because they got a fantastic flat.
Oh, yeah, how are they all affording it?
Yeah, at least in Seinfeld he's got a small flat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things make sense. It's, it talks to the lived working experience. Albeit...
Says us, theoretically working while sitting on your sofa.
Well, who that fuck knows what Kramer's up to. Anyway, that's by the way. So Timmy is wearing this tie, and he's very well spoken. And he brings in a video of cricket, and evidently Russell, this kind of like antediluvian male, who's American, obviously because he's big and athletic, challenges Timmy to cricket because he thinks he'll thrash him at cricket.
Right.
Because he'll thrash him at anything physical he'd be better at.
I see.
Well, of course, Timmy, who, even if he went to Oxford, they seem to keep referring to him as being South African, even though he's got an English accent, bowls wheels of 2 paces in an alleyway, left arm pace. And it looked genuine. I'm pretty sure this actor definitely played cricket.
I was going to say, does Adhere Kalyan, who played Timmy, have a cricket? You just keep doing your thing.
Yeah,
I'll learn more here. He is South African. He's Safa, known for his role in Timmy. And so, they've at least done that bit right.
Yeah.
His family are of Indian South African descent. His mother was a member of Parliament in the South African National Assembly, where she represented the Democratic Alliance. Isn't the DA the Mobu? Yeah, I better not say that actually. They're definitely not the ANC. Put it that way.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a big stronghold in Cape Town, I think.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Korea, and they claim that they're the ones keeping the lights on a bit more than they kept the one in Johannesburg, but still not all the time.
Yeah, a bit of that vibe when talking to a couple of people there a few years ago. Personal life, became married. He was engaged to an actress from General Hospital. Mm-hmm. They married in 2016, had a kid together in 2021. No divorce on Wikipedia at this point, but you never really know with these things. Any cricket references? I wonder if he's got a cricket archive page. You just crack on.
Well, I'm invested in the lad could bowl. And he bowls fast, and he goes straight through his boss's defences a couple of times. The third time, he hits the ball, bat flies out of his hand, and strikes their friend, right in the nuts.
I see.
This is
that well-worn.
Yeah,
he plays in the Southern California Cricket Association.
I am not surprised. It's got to be him. I am not surprised. It's got to be him.
Okay, let's see. Is he doing anything? There's a reference to it in an ESPN article. Cricket's surprising place in pop culture. That's rules of engagement thing.
Yeah.
Rules of engagement right in the Googlies. That must be what.
Right, and that's what he says. He says he's got me right in the Googlies.
Right in the Googlies,
which was quite sweet because obviously this is a programme that I don't think they did really understand much cricket.
Right.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if the actor was rescansible for suggesting the scene.
Big Bang Star loves Cricket World Cup. Okay, that might be mean anything. And Adir. Okay, I can't get on the Southern Californian cricket website without a key or something, but it looks like his current team is called the Casuals, and he's playing role as all-rounder. And, there you go.
Well, he can bowl.
He can bowl. He bowls left-arm pace.
He had a nice action. And,
is he available this Sunday?
Give him a go.
Yeah.
So look, it was an education watching Rules of Engagement. I might watch a couple more episodes now because of him. But that's what happens. Challenges into a game of cricket. It's kind of on us even, really. The bystander's the one who suffers most from it. Everything ends very happily. The massage person gets to have sex unwittingly, and a boss is accused of sexual harassment because she hugs somebody that everybody else wants to shag. It's an unusual episode, but that was it.
That's your old A plot, B plot, C plot right there for Brendan Crabb.
And all wrapped up in 20 minutes, which actually I've been talking longer about this than the whole episode of Rules of Engagement. But that, Brendan, is your answer. And thank you very much for sending it through. You've educated me on that. And thank you also to Andy Zoltzman for letting me know all those runouts, and indeed to whoever compiled the Bible, Constantine at the Council of Nicaea in 312 AD, around then, for coming up with Proverbs.
Learnt in his Oxford Classics education. Nice tie back as well. Brendan Crabb, 412. Thank you for being with us again as we go to the first break of the day. NordVPN is a thing that you should do and have and subscribe to if you're travelling. You and I travel loads. You and I often talk about me trying to get you onto your NordVPN. You get there eventually.
I do eventually.
It's
my fault, not
I was going to say, it's never a hurdle of Nord's.
It's not Nord's fault.
But you do get there eventually, and you end up on the system that you need to be on in order to watch Antiques Roadshow and to watch other programs that you watch here in South London.
It's brilliant. When you're abroad, especially if you're in, for example, Dubai, where you can't make WhatsApp calls.
Oh, yeah, that's an especially tricky sell, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the UAE, and you can't use WhatsApp, you do need to either have a SIM card of theirs, or you need to lean heavily on Nord.
And I did. It's very, very good. Just one little tip, though. Be careful. If you keep Nord on and you forget to turn it off and you come back and what you've done is routed yourself through a server in Pakistan, and then you go onto booking.com to see if there are any available hotels for the night in a pretty little seaside town, the prices will come up in Pakistani rupees. So just shift back.
But the other side of that, it's funny you happen upon that as a concept. So people use NordVPN to offset price discrimination, because some markets you will get fucked by prospective. They will alter the price depending on what currency you're using. I mean, am I going to say the one that's most obvious and risk getting sued? I'm not. But we use a lot of their devices.
Right.
We use a lot of their devices.
Yes.
They do you proper.
Right.
Depending on where you are in the world.
So if you did it with Pakistan rupees, would it be cheaper?
Well, I don't know how Pakistan.
Don't know which one, but
necessarily. But my wider point here is that you can kind of pick and choose where you wish to be when you purchase the product. And that,
good call.
Yeah, right. So price that can often be really useful with flights, where they get a bit, they mess around with these things as well. So this is one of the but the primary reason is to watch the stuff you want to watch when you're there, right?
TV shows,
subscription services, which we all live on these days, don't we? Sporting events. A couple of years ago, Women's Football World Cup was being played out in Australia. I was in Spain on holiday, but I was watching it on the BBC through my NordVPN. The Olympic Games last year, again, I was in Spain, I think. Yeah, I was in Spain. Watching much of the Olympics with Winnie on my NordVPN.
Nice.
So these are the things you can do. There's you get so many months discount at the moment. I have no idea how many it is, but it's more than one. It's like 4 or something. And there's 30-day money-back guarantee and all of that. NordVPN.com/TFW. And you can be where you need to be when you need to be there. Back in a sec. Story time 226. Adam Collins, Daniel Norcross, who said to me he was trying to get in and out of this in about 60 minutes, then gave a 33-minute answer to start with. We wouldn't have him any other way. I'm up with my first answer. Bearing in mind, I've got kind of 1.5 today. So,
okay, cool.
Yeah,
and my second one's shorter.
Yeah,
I promise.
That's okay. I don't mind. I've got no issue with this. My first one is Indi, who's been with us for a while. Thank you, Indi, for returning. 180 in Aussie dollars, and the clue is Nerd pledging a glorious New Year draw, and amidst exceptional performances and a final farewell, an outstanding opening stat, which I realise now I haven't read the last bit of the clue when preparing my answer, and I will dance. I will busk and work out what it is on the fly. Sometimes I'm doing it these days.
Yeah, it is.
When Jeff and I quite clearly fuck something up. We better work it out as we go. Right, Indi, this it feels very Steve Waugh-y.
Does it? Final farewell.
Final farewell. Yeah. Originally, I mistakenly thought we were talking about the 10,000th run day, which wasn't the farewell. That came a year later. Feels quite sort of remarkable to me now looking back that I not long turned 18 when we had the Sydney Test of 2003, yet it kind of feels so recent to me.
Yeah.
It's part of ageing, isn't it, that things that happened
a
long time ago, but I've doubled in age a little bit
That's
since
terrifying, because if I manage to live the next 22 years, I'll be 78.
There's a bit of that, isn't there?
Yeah, Suryavanshi will still be playing.
Yes. quite. He'll be 36 coming into his prime.
Oh, no, God.
Yeah, and you'll be 78, which was the age that Henry Blofeld was when he finished up. You'll be doing a lap of honour of Lords or something.
I doubt that.
As a fully certified national treasure.
Melissa Story's coming for my job.
Yeah. Well, she plays as well. So.
She does, and
we know that
she's very good.
And we know if you're a former cricketer, you're automatically a better commentator.
Correct.
That's a TV thing. Right, so it's not the Steve Waugh 10,000th run Test match. It's the one that happens a year later. Although I do note that the 18 would have been quite neat, me being 18, 180, but that's not fair. Well, I am going to do another 18 180 thing for the answer though, and we'll come to that in a little while.
Okay.
End of the series where India had a magnificent chance to win in Australia for the first time. This was the series where they won in Adelaide, Ajit Agarkar 6-for. They had the better of a draw in Brisbane, and then they lost in Melbourne. But a test match that, was in the balance for a decent slab of it. Ricky Ponting's double 100 defined it. But it was, Virendra Sehwag made 190 on the first day. So it wasn't like Australia pumped India entirely, but their bowlers, especially Brad Williams, were able to get busy when it mattered in the third and fourth innings of the match when they won by, I think, 5 wickets, something like that. But, yes, we arrived in Sydney, and it was more than just the series-defining match. Indeed, I don't really remember it being built up that way. I don't remember it being built up as like, here's India's first chance to win in Australia. It was all about the farewell to Steve Waugh.
And they never won a Test series in Australia.
And they hadn't to this point.
Never won it.
They hadn't to this point. So there was quite a bit riding on this test. But again, you wouldn't have known it based on the coverage that we were getting back in Oz at the time.
How curious.
Very
because that Indian team was under Ganguly. He was often credited, wasn't he, with being the first Indian captain that made winning the most important thing.
Exactly.
Now, you can argue the toss over that or not. But that was sort of the perception, wasn't it, that India were now there to fight hard and not just be like accommodating guests.
That's right. The more more forceful in his approach.
The Ganguly approach.
And they were developing a terrific rivalry. Like they played in the World Cup final of 2003 against each other when Ganguly claimed a catch that bounced a foot in front of him, and Australia went on to win that rather comfortably. But they had the 2001, perhaps the greatest 3-test series ever.
Oh yeah.
The Calcutta partnership with Dravid and Ganguly, Dravid and Latchman rather, and everything else that went with it there. So, this had loads of context when they rocked up on the 2nd of January 2004. I was curious about how Steve Waugh had gone in that year, because remember, there was quite a bit about that 10,000th run innings. When he reached 69, he passed 10,000 test runs, which was major, and his 100 was his 29th pulling level with Bradman. So, it was layered and layered, and he had a poor Ashes. So had he failed there at Sydney, it's entirely possible he would have been almost forced into retirement just short of 10,000 and just short of Bradman. So, there was loads on that test match and that final ball 100, which I was there for in the Brawongle stand, again, as a young lad and all of that. But by this stage, a year on, I didn't kind of clock that he had such a good year. He went on to average 80 in that 12-month stretch. 300s, one against the Windies and a couple against Bangladesh. It might have been his 30th 100 at Sydney. Either way, the point I'm making is that there was Sydney, then there was 3 other hundreds in that year.
Constantly not out as well. He was always not out, that man.
Yeah, he did do a lot of red inking, which
good for him.
I agree. Like, good for him. Yeah, I kind of get a bit sniffy when people are like, oh well, of course, the average is inflated by what? With bowling averages, when you pick up the tail ender, they don't go, oh well, it's a weighted average because
exactly. And also, it saves us the incredible annoyance of farming the strike at the back end. He was more interested in the red inker, so if there's a complete rabbit at the other end, he took a single off the first ball and waited for his not out to come home.
And often trusted his tail enders, famously Glenn McGrath, who got into a couple of test hundreds later in his career. So the other thing about time is that it felt inconceivable to me in that summer that Steve Waugh had played cricket in 1985. So, the year after I was born. It felt like, how's it plausible that a guy who's still playing now in 2004, at the very start of 04, had played at the very end of 85? That always, blew my mind. But now, it's 20, nearly 21 and a half years on from that.
Like a lot of Aussies, when he started, people didn't realise how much better he was at batting than bowling. And a bit of a Steve Smith thing. When he first, I remember him playing in 86-7, and we were sort of informed of this bowling all-rounder. Actually, he's just
big
a medium pacer.
It's a genuinely big part of his story. You go before he made that breakthrough 100 in 1989 after famously 27 Test matches. He had done. He'd been primarily Australia's second change bowler. And that was the way they would shuffle the pack. Anyway, so all these years on, he's saying goodbye to Test cricket. Everyone wanted him to get a 33rd Test ton. There was so much build-up. The newspapers gave out red rags, because remember, he would carry that red hanky around. Yes. The newspapers gave them out at the station, so you'd take the red rag and you'd flutter it about and all this bullshit. Even then, I wasn't too big a fan of this, but it was the thing that you're getting a flavour of how it felt in Sydney that week. I wasn't there for day one. I was working day one. I went up to Sydney that night, so I was there for day two and beyond. So actually, just going back to 1 year earlier, I was there listening to that Steve Waugh 100, listening to Aggers and Kerry O'Keefe calling it together, and it had become such a big deal that they'd done this piece of commentary together. They did a visit to the Hill later in the Test match, and I went along and met Jonathan Agnew. I was like, starstruck.
Is that your first time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He would have been like, I guess, 40 odd or something, and I was like 18.
Yeah.
Little did I know I'd gone to work with him. And Kerry O'Keefe as well, who's been very kind to Jeff and I over the years with this pod, and I would love to have him on at some stage. It's one of these things we've never actually gotten around to. So a year on, the first day of that Test match, India are in rude health. They're 284 for 3. Sachin 73 not, Lakshman's 29 not. If you get a chance though, find the star highlights on YouTube of what Lakshman does on day two when I'm there for, as he motors to 178. I often get asked my favourite innings in Test cricket, and I reflexively say this. I loved Mark Waugh growing up, especially his fluency through the leg side. And Lakshman, the way that he played through mid-on that day, time and time again, it was a sight to behold. It was truly otherworldly. And he made the 100 at Sydney in 1999 when India were being thrashed. He nearly recorded a Bannerman, actually. But 4 years on from that, he'd had the Calcutta Miracle in 2001, and he was the complete player here in 2004. And he'd go on to make another 100 at Sydney 4 years on from that, which I was also at. Anyway, Sachin goes on to complete the job, makes a double 100. But they go, and after Lakshman's out, they go to stumps day two, 650 for 5. So they don't pull out before the close of play.
No, I don't mind that. I don't believe in the last half hour before the close of play. I don't think it brings you wickets.
Well, whether it does or doesn't, if you need to win that Test match, if you need to win the Test match,
you should probably get on with it.
You probably shouldn't bat into day 3.
Yeah, it's a good point.
They did. Yeah. They batted into day 3, which is super rare. You do see it, but like once every couple of years, a team might bat into day 3 to truly destroy a side. I remember at the end of day 2, there was like Bronx cheers from the Sydney crowd when I think Stuart McGill gesticulated to the crowd when Brett Lee got a wicket. Brett Lee took 4 for 201 with 18 front foot no balls. Returning from injury, he was rusty, but that was the vibe. I mean, Cat bowled 17 overs, Bracken bowled 37 frugal overs, and Gillespie was returning from injury as well. So it was a painful outing for the Australian bowling group, absent McGrath, absent Warne. Day 3, they are batting again. It was all a bit weird. But this was when Partheev Patel, who was overnight 45, I think he was 17 or 18. And even, again, I was taken by the fact that someone who was younger than me could be playing Test cricket and doing it so well.
Quite small as well.
Tiny. Party time Patel. Yeah. And he was party time. 62 not from 50 balls. So
nice.
It was the right decision for them to pick him and stick with him. And despite being so young, Australia's bowling attack, as I said before, they were beaten up, but they didn't have Brad Williams, who played the previous week. They didn't have Warne McGrath, so it was a compromised Australian team, but still, it was still the Australian team at Sydney in a must-win Test match. So no detracting at all from the magnificent 700 runs that they posted. The previous week, they were in the game, as I mentioned before. Just an aside here, I remember sitting at the very top of the Olympic stand, or the top deck of the Olympic stand, which was the nearest that you could be to behind the bowler's arm when they were still doing work on the MCG at the time. And I didn't... They knocked that stand down the next year and they rebuilt it. So I've got a nice memory of watching that series in a spot which I loved watching cricket in, and would return to it to watch Hawthorn play the 2014 grand final in standing room down beneath that, where we pumped Sydney, which was a lovely day. Anyway, back to Sydney, where this story moves on. I'll give you the mindset of Australian fans. India makes 705 for 7. Australian fans, commentators on the radio, on the television, it would have been on Twitter had it been such a thing. That's okay. Australia will get 506 and declare. There'll be 199 behind.
They'll
bowl them out and they'll chase 400.
400 in 2 seconds.
I'm telling you, this was just as said as like the sun were coming up in the morning. Oh no, of course Australia, because that was what I want to convey here That was the confidence in this particular Australian side under Steve Waugh. Whatever the challenge, whatever the hurdle, they will find a way to clear it. And given there was so much riding on this test match, both in the context of the series, but the strong Steve Waugh storyline, it was just taken as assumed. And so it felt. They put on 147 wicketless runs in the first 30 overs. That's what Hayden and Langer put on. Langer got to a century, got 117, with a reverse sweep, which was so unlike Justin Langer. A reverse sweep, little bottom edge, I remember it now, went just past the stumps and went through the keeper's legs for four.
2001 as well.
You didn't see that type of thing from someone like Langer.
2004.
Simon Kadich then plays his role. He'd had an interesting start to his test career. He debuted at Leeds in 01, but hadn't really established himself. He'd had a few starts in this series, got 75 at Adelaide, but hadn't clinched his spot, and here he kind of did. This was the best of Kadich version 1.0, playing beautifully through the offside. They had to bat into day 4 Australia, and they were still short of India's 705, and they were still short of 506. They're eventually bowled out for 474, but in the process, Kadich gets his first test 100 and is bowled out. Australia are bowled out for 474. He's out for 125. They don't enforce the follow-on, so all's well that ends well. They have to bowl out India, in theory. They don't. India rack up 211 for 2 declared in like a session and a half.
I was going to say, it must be quick.
They did do it really quickly. They popped Australia back in that night, leaving them 94 overs to chase 443. And again, I'm honestly, it was taken as read overnight.
So it's actually like required run rate was down the bottom rather than, anything else.
Totally. That night, I don't know what they closed
about
on.
4.8 and over, I suppose.
But it was just taken as assumed that they would give it a red-hot go and they would probably do it. They would, Leeds 404 in a day. For that, read Sydney 443 in a day. It was just reported like this was the type of thing, and Steve Waugh would make 100 and it would all be this great fairy tale. Like, it totally jars with what we understand to be the orthodoxy of the game, but such was the confidence again in this team. And, once again, they kind of have a go at it. I mean, Hayden and Langer put on 75, but it's in 16 overs. So they are chasing. Yeah. They're not talking about drawing it. They are absolutely attacking this in the same way that they did in 2001 when they went after a total on the last day.
It's Bazball before Bazball.
Bazball before Bazball. You got it. However, then wickets start falling. Ponting's caught and bowled for 47. They're 196 for 4 in the 56 over, and it feels like it's over, right? But then Kadich walks in with Steve Waugh, and they go nuts for half a session. They add 150 in 25 overs. They've got to the point where they need to chase at 8s or 9s for the last hour. And again, it's like, oh, well, there you go. That's what's going to happen, isn't it? Because Steve Waugh's going to go and make this. He's playing the slog sweep, all the greatest hits. The Prime Minister's there. I remember John Howard being in the crowd. Kind of everyone was there, apart from me. I've been days 2, 3 and 4. Day 5 was already sold out because of the Steve Waugh thing. I was less resourceful in those days. I didn't have my way in, so I was watching this on television at my parents, who happened to live in Sydney at the time, for shame. But yeah, Waugh holes out to Sachin on 80, and that's it. That's the gig up. Kadich is still there and blazes to 77 not out, but yes, they have to shake hands. Gilchrist was playing. He would have been,
because he would have been part of the assumption that they were going to get there, wouldn't he?
It's a fair point. So Gilchrist comes in and makes 6 from 25. So they must have called it off.
Yeah.
So they've called it off when Steve Waugh's out, and they basically play out for the draw just in case. Because of course, had they been bowled out in pursuit of the runs that were by that stage comically far away, they would have ceded the series to India. So. That was the test match. That was the draw. The 80, the 180, the one score of 80 that Steve Waugh made. I'm sure that's what it must relate to.
The score of 80.
That's what I'm going with. I'm pondering now, though, the opening partnerships. Opening partnerships across the match, 123, 147.
That's 270.
11's a bit neither here nor there, and 75. So I'm not sure what the opening partnership vibe there is from. So from our pleasure in the clue, Indi.
180. Let me just think.
Is there a 180 here?
Is it the combined number of caps between Langer and Hayden?
An outstanding opening stat, a final farewell, and I just don't sort of feel it. No. I feel like it's going to be something that we can't like literally see on the page. Well, I guess there's 100 there for Langer, but what's that telling us? What's that story? It's not really telling us much of a story. 147, and in the second innings it was nothing much going on other than Australia chasing hard at the start. So Indi, please tell us what we've missed here. There is one more thread, it's quite final word, that I'm going to have just enough time to drop in before our next break. Like, this was Steve Waugh's final test match. I'll tell you two more things. First of all, he played a very similar innings in his final first-class match as well. It was actually Mark Waugh. They played their last first-class game together in late 04, it must have been. So it would have been end of this season, or did he play into 05? It was, I'll tell you actually, instead of me speculating, why don't I actually bring up the card? The last first-class game they played was in March of 04, so a couple of months on from this. Steve Waugh and Mark Waugh playing together. They both finished up at the same time, which is rather cute. So Steve Waugh, as captain, was out early, but they were chasing 277 and they had 54 runs, 54 overs to do it, which was unheard of. Mark Waugh made 72 from 49 balls. And in doing so, the reason I partly raised this because I was always kind of obsessed with the non-existent Mark Waugh-Steve Waugh rivalry. It was more a rivalry in my head. Steve Waugh's first-class average, 51.94, right? 7900s, 51.94. In that innings, Mark Waugh's first-class average eclipsed Steve, 52.04. So he passed Steve by, what are we looking at here, by a tenth of a run or something like that. And he also made two more hundreds than Steve, and they played... that was a game Mark played 12 more first-class games.
And that was the game that did the flipperoo.
That was the innings that did the flipperoo, the last innings that they played together in first-class cricket as a bit of a bonus. And more of a bonus, what I've missed in our story so far is name-checking a man who is final word adjacent. He's Bharat Sundaresan's cousin, Pelechaty.
Yes, he's very much
played in this test match and picked up no wickets in the first innings and 1 wicket in the second. But I'm going to let Bharat pick up the story of why his family, to this day, feel aggrieved about this test match and the umpire that they blame. Thank you, Baz. Second week in a row we've been able to drop him into the podcast, Daniel.
Lovely.
Which is a lovely thing to do. As we go to the break, and again, that was a nice thing to be able to go back to nearly 21 years on for Indi. The final word story time. And every episode in season 18, as we mentioned before, is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Some of the best lawyers in Australia. Why stop there? Where the caveat? The best lawyers in Australia work at Maurice Blackburn. If we're wrong, sue us. We'll be defended by the Maurice Blackburn Lawyers.
Good point.
We'll call them up. One of their offices, I think there's something like 30 offices around the country. And that's not even the full, you just jump online, you search them. They are across every inch of like industrial workplace law. You know, they know what they're doing. If you feel like you have recourse for something that's going on at work, they'll be able to work it out for you.
If you're being stiffed.
If you're being stiffed. They're the type of, they engage in massive class actions, some that have been very highly publicised across the journey. They've received, or they've earned on behalf of their clients extraordinary recompense where people have been done over for various things. So they're that kind of law firm. They live their values, and we're very proud to be in association with them. On that note, we'll go to our second break. Final word, 226. It's me, Adam Collins. It's him, Dan Norcross. Daniel Norcross never lived in Australia. If he did, Odin Mortgage and Tax might have been who he needed to sort out his financial affairs with. You were never really a chance of living in Australia, were you? That wasn't really, you never did any sort of time over there other than when you worked in cricket.
It's not because I object to it, but I suppose it was the work really, and also I got to be brutally honest with Australians, because I do like Australia in many ways, and very friendly and lovely people, but it's the lack of a piazza. The lack of open squares with columns, with stone buildings. This matters to me. If I'm going to go somewhere hot, I want it to be Italy. I want to be under an umbrella. It's a lovely cobbled street. I want architecture. And I'm going to say this, at risk of being seriously attacked. Perth is just a hot Croydon. Yeah, you don't catch me going to Croydon. And I'm afraid I stand by it. But for that reason, I do particularly love Adelaide because of the wrought iron railings everywhere. I have a thing for Adelaide.
You too. And maybe Mays will be there later in the year.
Maybe Mays. Oh, I can't wait. And I do have a thing for Melbourne as well. Yeah. So, I don't know why, it never panned out that way, but I like working in Australia for a discrete period of time, like a couple of months.
Well, if you had gone the other way and done what I've done, and to an extent what Jeff's done as well, because Jeff's based in Portugal these days too.
He is, yeah.
As expats, you may be in a situation, and many Aussies do come here for a stretch of time with a view to moving home. A lot of people I know have returned to Australia to take their kids to school. I get asked that quite a bit.
Normal.
I get asked quite a bit. Do you want your kids educated in Australia? To which I say, good luck untangling my arrangements over here in England.
Right.
That's not happening. But if I were to be of that mindset. I would need to have my shit together.
You
have
would?
my ducks in a row. Odin Mortgage and Tax are the people for that. The mortgage consultations are free. So that's if you've already got a mortgage or you wish to have one as an Aussie expat. 2,000 of them in 40 countries have worked with Odin. Or if you need to file tax returns in 2 countries, or indeed if you're filing one here but you might have to file one in Australia or vice versa, $300 for the consultation. And that will be, I've no doubt, money well spent.
It's like an expat concierge service, isn't it?
They have a concierge that work with you once you engage their services as well. So it's one-to-one
I think that's wonderful.
support. And yeah, they've been great to work with so far. So Odin Mortgage and Tax. Hit the final word link in the show notes if you think this might be applicable to you. I suspect a lot of people who are listening right now would be helped a lot by having their support. We've got 2 numbers to get through, 1.5, because I'm going to sort of fudge it a little bit. That's okay. We're going to start with your one, which is a free hit from Tom Bustin. He's new. Tom's new with us.
Hello.
Tom, I don't know when you joined, but I'm so glad that you have. It means that our community keeps growing and we can keep doing things like we're doing right now and many other things besides, given we're going to produce somewhere in the order of 300 episodes this year. I've been saying 250, but it's now like close to 300.
So we'll have all the dailies as well during the
dailies,
during the
shitloads of them. We don't ever stop doing long programs because of the dailies. Lots of interviews. I've probably done, 20 interviews already this year. I'm sure there'll be many, many more. Book club stuff, film club of late as well.
You're a channel. You're not a podcast.
We do lots of things. Do lots of things.
You're like Amazon.
Yeah, you could say that. The Amazon of cricket. I don't know. That's probably not quite good.
All right. Netflix. I don't know.
Yeah. But Tom Bustin, he's busted a move here with $685 Aussie dollars. It's a free hit. It's Daniel's. I know how much you enjoy these. I'm going to give you 12 minutes.
Yeah, well, it might take that long. We'll see how it goes.
Okay.
$685. The wonderful thing about a free hit is it's exactly that. It's a free hit. So I get to perambulate and look around like the number 685. It could be 6 for 85.
Yep.
It could be the 6th of August 05. If I'd
What would have that been? I can tell you the 15th of August 05 was the last day of the Manchester Test match because it was the day I turned 21.
In which case, it almost certainly would have, because weren't Trent Bridge
and Manchester back to back.
Oh. So it would have been...
Well...
Yeah, it would have been a bit...
05 Ashes, Klaxon. Let's bring it up. Yeah, you do your thing, I'll do my thing.
So, other things you look at. Test player number 685. Well, only England has given anything like that many caps. Willy-nilly. They're just thrown around like confetti.
Occasionally, very much willy-nilly.
Occasionally, very much indeed. Especially in the 1880s. But... we've got Don Bess.
Ooh,
685.
You know what? It was Birmingham and Manchester that were back to back.
Was it Birmingham?
And then but they were all kind of clogged in together. And the test started on the 4th at Birmingham, which means the 6th was the penultimate day. And the penultimate day was a cracking day. You'll
never bowl a braver ball.
That's Mark Nicholas saying, given the moment, which he himself said to us on calling the shots that he would. That's the Harmison to Clark. Slow ball.
I was playing cricket that day. I was captaining my twos.
Yeah.
And it was a rare thing. We actually won the game, I think.
Nigel
the Bear Walker, one of the commentators on Guerrilla Cricket.
Yeah, of course.
He spun us to victory. I think
Did he really?
A 5, but yeah, he's a very handy left-arm spinner as the Bear.
Good to know. What's to play this Sunday? It was Michael Clark bowled Harmison for 30, which was late in the day.
That's the 6th of August 05.
That's the play. That was Stumps. That was Stumps. So Stumps was when Clark was bowled. Final ball of the day, Steve Harmison. Given the moment, given the stakes, and all something like that.
Yeah, and there were no stakes. It was the last
ball
day. He was able to bowl. Could have been a half tracker. It wouldn't have made any difference.
But it did mean that they went back the next day needing
2 wickets.
And we went on to have one of the great finishes in Test cricket, where England with won by 2 runs. Jones, Harmison, Kaspavic, Bowden, Jones, Bowden, Kaspavic, the man to go. Which
beautiful.
You could hear on calling the shots. Mark Nicholas doing that Benno impersonation and slotting in his own observation of each. It's probably the best bit of the whole 7 eps.
It was electrifying talking to Mark, wasn't it?
He
gave us 4 hours,
and he wouldn't agree to this proposition when I interviewed him last year at Lord's, but he was emotional.
He was
like basically crying. He didn't want to concede that in that interview, but it's true, because that part of his life means a tremendous amount when he was anchoring Channel 4. Anyway, we move on.
That was the 6th of August, 05. Don Bess. Don Bess was one of
the
these...
Don Bess. I think of the Don Bess. When I hear the Don Bess, I think of Don Bess.
Yes, me too. Yeah. Don't you invade...
The Don Bess region.
Don't you invade Don Bess. Anyway, he, bless him, you'll remember, burst onto the scene as England went in search of spin bowlers. It didn't quite work out for him. His batting's come on, but his bowling, like many an English off-spinner, I think has been perhaps exposed a bit too early, not being given the opportunity to, to grow. But his time may yet come. We remember Graham Swan, he did the bulk of his career after the age of 27, 28.
That's true.
So it's time for Don Bess. Test match number 685. Let me run you through test match number 685.
Let's throw a dart at the dartboard. We were in the
early 70s.
70s. Okay.
Very early 70s.
Okay.
A game that began on April Fool's Day, 1971. West Indies against India at Bridgetown, Barbados. And it's a funny thing, the West Indies, because you think of the 60s West Indies team, and you can rattle off so many of them. Hall, Griffith, Warrell World Cup weeks coming to the end of their careers, of course, but you've still got Gary Sobers, Rowan Canai, big names, big names. But actually this side, by 1971, and this is sort of before 76, when you can then rattle off all their names as well, it's a little bit of an interregnum. Roy Fredericks, we all know. Desmond Lewis, wasn't particularly familiar with Desmond Lewis. He was a keeper that opened the batting, scored 88. Rowan Canai, yes, of course. Charlie Davis, again, not a household name. Gary Sobers, very much a household name. Skippery, scores 178, not out. Clive Lloyd, in at 6. But then the bowling attack, Maurice Foster, John Shepherd, used to play for Kent, Inshan Ali, Van Burn Holder, and, for the purposes of this little chat, Uton Dow. Utondowe.
Okay. Not on mine. Never come across him.
Never come across him in my life. Right arm, fast bowler. Well-built fast bowler. Took 4 for 69 against India at Kensington Oval, but failed to impress thereafter. He played 4 test matches, and he batted 3 times. He picked up 12 wickets at an average of 44.5. But the little factoid I really like about it is that, prone to being wildly erratic, he was mauled by Keith Stackpole, who's recently died.
Yeah, so, passed away last week, Stacky. We spoke about him on the show.
You don't want to be mauled by Keith Stackpole, though. He was mauled by Keith Stackpole to such an extent in the Jamaica Test of 72-73, so the following West Indies season, if you like, that the crowd erected a series of banners proclaiming an 11th commandment: "Thou shalt not bowl."
That's good.
It's so West Indian as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, that's a wonderful sense of humour.
Lovely.
Uton Dow. So that's from test match number 685. But the bulk of my story, and I say the bulk, for the next 3 or 4 minutes, 6 for 85. It screamed at me. When I saw 685, it screamed at me. Why did it scream at me? Malcolm Marshall, 6 for 85. At Lord's, 1984, one of the most famous of test matches, and slap bang at the sort of peak of my childhood obsession. So girls are appearing across the horizon. They're starting to really kind of, blur my priorities. Up to the age of 14, I see nothing but cricket. I can't see other humankind. I don't understand anybody who doesn't think and only think about cricket. Girls are starting to come, but they can't penetrate the West Indies coming in 1984. Even then,
I expect so. I mean, this stood out in the pandemic, going back to 2020 again, where Isha was commissioned to do, before they had Test cricket resuming in, I think it was second week of July or something like that. I guess they were meeting their editorial commitments to the BBC with what cricket they were putting to air. They were doing Saturday night highlight shows of tests gone by.
That's right.
And they did they did Gooch's extraordinary century at Leeds in 1991. So that's a great test match. Ramprakash and Hicks to
Ramprakash, as a headline said on the Evening Standard, because the incredible catch he took.
Yeah. And Graham Hicks to boo, and then what what Gooch goes on to do in the second innings, which goes down as one of the all-time great Test innings. But the second in that sequence was Lords in 1984, which I'm sure you're going to go through now. But the fourth innings chase and what Foxy does beforehand.
Yes, well, exactly that.
And Malcolm Marshall being right at the peak of his powers, and kind of giving a feel and a flavour for what London felt like when watching the West Indies play in a time when not only were they the best team in the world, but Test cricket was accessible to a working class community who would rock up and support the team in their droves.
It was electrifying because the West Indies would have this incredible, I say, travelling support. I mean, basically, all the Caribbean origined people in London appeared just to arrive for the Test match, and they had this. They just enlivened the place you were in, and for Lords it was particularly strange because Lords never able to get used to it. The Oval was. That was just what happened at the Oval there, and you had the clanking cans. So people would arrive, they'd bring the cans, but they wouldn't throw them away. They would tap the empty cans on top of each other, making this wonderful noise that would just like reverberate all around the Oval. They would sit in the on the terraces. In 1984, I went to the Oval Test match where I was given moonshine by a very elderly Caribbean gentleman. And it was just basically meths.
So you were being plied with booze at 15 at the Oval by
I was, and I was slap bang in the middle of the West Indies fans, and I got to know them a little bit while they were there, and they were thoroughly lovely to me. And then this old geezer says, "We're not going to support the West Indies anymore. This isn't fair on this boy. We're going to support England." So they supported England for 10 minutes. England lost 3 wickets. He went, "Fuck this! We're going back to the West Indies." And then he passed me a bottle of moonshine. Which was delicious. That
would have been a more suitable way to determine who you support than a Tebet test at the time, I suppose, which was, are England getting smashed or otherwise? If they are, you can determine whether you're following them or not.
Exactly. I don't see why not. It was a cruel and unusual form of punishment to expect, British Jamaicans to be supporting England against this fantastic West Indies side, and it was what was called at the time the blackwash. It's an interesting way of looking at it. It was probably the most dominant that the West Indies were in England across those series, because in 1980 they actually only won 1-0. They won the first game by 3 wickets, and the rest of them were draws. England were pretty plucky, actually, particularly incredible effort at the Oval to save the game with Bob Willis and Peter Willey.
Yep.
Job forward to 1984. And for the most part, the West Indies had their best side out, and they had a habit of ending people's careers very quickly. So in the first Test match, Andy Lloyd had played, and his career lasted about 28 minutes before his retina was detached.
Oh, gosh.
Paul Terry got his arm broken. The backdrop of the series was that basically the West Indies bowled very fast. The England batters weren't quite up to it. England were also disbenefited by some of their better players, including Graham Gooch, having gone to South Africa on the Rebel Tour.
Of course.
So they weren't available. But it did give opportunities for people like Graham Fowler and Chris Broad. Chris Broad, famously, when he was selected, I think it might have been when he was selected for this test, met Alec Bedser, the chairman of selectors, who said, "Good luck tomorrow, Brian," because he'd never watched him on TV, and his name's BC Broad, and he'd checked what his first name was. So, this is just what a state English cricket was in. The selector doesn't even know the name of the opening batter that he's congratulating on getting his cap. But anyway, the script didn't go the way most of the Test matches went in that series. Second Test match, I believe. And a bowling attack of Garner, Milton Small, Malcolm Marshall, Eldine Baptiste and Roger Harper were sort of kept at bay. 286 in the first innings. England got an opening partnership of 101 between Graham Fowler and Chris Broad. David Garrett in and out in no time. But then Alan Lamb is next, Mike Gatting, Ian Botham. It's a decent side. Paul Downton in there as well. And holding the fort for a 259 ball, 106 is Graham Fowler. I think the innings he's probably most proud of. Then what happens has sort of gone down in folklore, really. West Indies 245, so England get a first innings lead of 41. Ian Botham, you forget sometimes just what a complete monster that man was, how many overs he could bowl. We've talked about the famous Bombay Test when he bowled unchanged from beginning to end of the innings over the course of 2.5 sessions in Mumbai, of all places. He bowls 27.4 of the 65.4 overs, 8 for 103.
Which remain the best figures at Lords for a home bowler, what you're saying?
I believe that might be right.
Yeah.
A couple of wickets for Bob Willis. So England had got this precious lead. Alan Lamb gets one of the 3 centuries, I think he gets in that series. Ian Botham, who tend to struggle with the bat, everyone struggled with the bat against the West Indies. He gets 81 as well, so he's nailed on man of the match. He's taken 8 for 103, scored 81. England declare on the 5th morning. Can you believe it? To be able to declare against the West Indies, unheard of in that era. Setting the West Indies a notional 352 in 2 sessions and an hour. Well, not one single England bowler takes a wicket. There is 1 wicket to fall. It is that of Desmond Haynes, who is run out when the score is on 57. The West Indies coast to victory. This isn't a nail-biter. This isn't, are they going to be able to get there? It's not like any of the ones we've been talking about there. India against Australia. They pissed it. 344 for 1, thanks to Gordon Greenwich on 1 leg, scoring 214 in 242 balls, 29 fours, 2 sixes. One of the great innings. Larry Gomes unbeaten on 92. Much unheralded player, Larry Gomes. People forget that he was the glue in that batting lineup. Greenwich, Haynes, everyone forgets Gomes, Viv Richards, Clive Lloyd, Jeff Dujon.
And I think Greenwich, even with his wonderful career and the way he's seen with Desmond Haynes, is a great opening partnership, because he made so many 90s as well. Like, statistically, he could have... It's just one of those quirks where if he convert... He's got a ridiculous number of 90s. If a number of them are tick over to 3 figures, he's seen even differently again.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such as the way in which we evaluate the game decades later.
Anyway, unbeaten double 100 from Gordon Greenwich. England's spirits broken.
Yeah.
Because they've lost a game they could never have lost. They've declared in a game that they've lost. And Foxy tells a great story of being in the bath, in the changing rooms at the end of that game. And pretty much everyone's gone, but he's overhearing Bob Willis and Ian Botham chatting about how they can possibly fight back in this series. And they hatch a plan, not realising that Foxy can hear it while he's lying in the bath, say, we're going to have to make the pitches really spicy. It's the only thing we can do to equalise things. And Foxy just shouting
Thanks for that.
Yeah, you'll need to have St John's ambulance on call. It's at the end of that series, Foxy also tells a lovely story about how relieved he was. He hadn't realised how relieved he was, because he was almost, when he's out for the last time, shaking and crying because he's realised that he's not been hit or killed. And he hadn't realised how, not scared isn't the right word, but just how traumatic the whole experience of that 5-test series had been until it was over, until he allowed himself the space to think, I've got through it.
Well, it's you're too flippant about the jargon here, but there is a version of PTSD to that, isn't there? When you're putting yourself in a situation where you could be seriously hurt or have your life affected, and you are doing it because it is the peak of your athletic endeavour, but at the same time, it's running the gauntlet on when protection was what it was or wasn't. As it
well, you see, I mean, I went and watched the highlights of Malcolm Marshall's extraordinary bowling, the 6 for 85, which is where this comes from, and it's petrifying because he was short, and yet he could get it up throat and chin from an action that does not change. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, cricket's not as good; they couldn't have been that fast." You look at him doing that, and you see that the players have not got visors; they've just got a lot of them have just got the helmet. So, what about your mush, mate? You know, your teeth, your nose, these parts of your face also matter. And you just see how just sort of frightening and flimsy the protective headgear was against the sheer brilliance of Malcolm Marshall's bowling. And the last story that Foxy tells about that game is that at one point Desmond Haynes says to him, Fox, stop shouting, will you, when he was batting. And he's going, what are you talking about? Just stop shouting. Apparently, and Foxy hadn't even realised he was doing it, as the bowler came in, he was going, and like screaming, like to get himself up for the fight, to concentrate, to look at the ball. It was basically war without the bullets.
Well, yeah, it's that idea of, you don't want to sort of overplay this point, but there is a militaristic point to this, isn't there? That idea of I have to absorb whatever's coming.
And, battle cries, and you see it so much, I mean, these things do happen. So, look, that's 685. It's 6 for 85 for Malcolm Marsh. It's an incredible test match. If you didn't know about it before, go and check out some highlights. If you did know about it, it's worth remembering.
Tom, thank you for joining our community. Wonderful to have you. Patreon.com/The Final Word. If you want to join Tom and join Discord and be part of what we're doing with the zero ducks given versus Final Word cricket game on the 18th of August at Wormsley, which is going to be such a special occasion, raising money for the Lord's Taverners. Okay, last number for me today, which we'll get through relatively quickly because I'm mindful you've got places to be. Andrew Pelechaty, who has not only rejoined, or should I say, not only sent another Nerd Pledge number through, but he's doubled his pledge. Which is,
wow.
Yeah, pretty nice, cool thing in our community when people choose to do these things. Andrew, who bowled spin for us in the Final Word game against the Reds last year in Melbourne, bowled very nicely. I know he's a lover of the off-spin craft. A lover of very passionate sports fan, rugby league and lots of different various interests. So great to have him with us again today. So he was 150 and originally he wanted us to talk about Funky Miller. This funky new skill was a nice addition to the Australian Test team, which I was going to talk about when Funky was bowling seam up and off spin concurrently. And there was no real hook to this numerically other than the fact that he batted 150 times in first class cricket. Wonder how many times he was run out to come full circle with your answer earlier. He played 15 Sheffield Shield seasons, it might have been that. But when I was messaging Andrew earlier today, he said he didn't actually remember what it meant. So then he informs me that he doubled his pledge to 300, which is great of him. And he wanted me to think about Nathan Lyon milestones.
Right.
He might have even just said milestones and 300. Nathan Lyon. Yeah, we squared it off and worked out that he was referring to when Nathan Lyon collected his 300th Test wicket. And I thought, instead of giving you chapter and verse on Nathan Lyon, which we surely could, and again, aware that we don't have enormous amounts of time at our disposal, I'll tell you my experience of wicket 300. It was the day after Sandpaper. So Sandpaper.
Which you were at.
Indeed, I was. I was commentating on that. I was sat with Brendan Julian when it happened on SEN Radio, and we didn't really think much of it because, well, obviously something was going on, but in the commentary box we were in, we didn't have a monitor. We were relying on the big screen on the other side of the ground, and we just couldn't really tell what was going on. Something was going on. The sunglasses case, which was taken out of the pocket, but there was no way for us to, from 100 metres away, start providing a commentary on what may or may not have been in.
And you've got to be careful as well.
Desperately careful. Indeed, if you listen back to my commentary, I suspect, in fact I know, I said something like we would want to be very careful about allegations of ball tampering. Pat Cummins had been accused of ball tampering the day before when he stepped on the ball in his follow-through, which was just ludicrous nonsense from people on the internet who really should focus on other things. And indeed, James Anderson was accused of ball tampering at Melbourne. Indeed, it appeared on the back page of a newspaper in Australia with a zoomed in image of him cleaning out the seam. If you zoomed out, you would have seen him doing it in front of the umpires with the umpire's consent, which is the practice. Right. And it didn't stop. It didn't stop a bunch of fuckwits basically who couldn't help themselves intentionally twist that story to make it look like Anderson was ball tampering in the Melbourne Test of 2017. So that was the context to all of this. And there was a lot of that going on at the time, square-ups and so on. And the Anderson one was especially egregious.
It's funny how you get sort of roll, isn't it? Sometimes you get clusters of time when we're talking nonsense about one particular thing.
It was ridiculous. And this was later in the same season. So you go Anderson to Cummins to this with what, and we didn't know. At the tea break, we all piled into the ante-room. There was an ante-room at the end of the commentators' row where everyone was sharing TV and radio together. It actually was the room next to SEN's box, and I could see through it. And one commentator at the lunch break was head down sleeping because he'd been out till 6 a.m. To the point, we're watching in this ante-room, like 30, maybe even 40 people squeezed in, watching as they went through the super, super slow-mo, and everyone, as one's like, like all, the great and the good of commentary are in there, and and people like me who just happened to be there at the time, watching everyone else as much as anything else.
I would have been like what Sean Pollock, Pommy and Bangor.
You've got it. Mikey Holding, we were working with in that series. Brendan Julian.
What was his reaction, Mikey?
I don't remember. No, I probably could work it out because I was doing videos with Mikey. But Adam Voges was working with us, who happened to be Cameron Bancroft's mentor. So there was that extra layer of these things as well, that he'd worked with Bancroft all the way through his, I guess his junior career and WA as a junior batter in the team and so on. And we went back on radio after tea, and that was obviously very difficult for Vogesy, having to give a view on this, but he had to do his job faithfully and say what he'd seen. What happens next is that we get through this passage of play where Australia are getting pretty badly beaten up. And this is the final session of play. And as we now know, for 1 over, Steve Smith goes off the ground, and David Warner's actually captaining in his absence for that 1 over. I suppose that was probably to relay to Smith that something was going down.
Yep.
They left the field of play, and we sat there in the media centre at Cape Town and waited and waited and waited to see who was going to come across the field to deliver the press conference that night. And nobody came, and it was pitch black. And as they slowly made their way over from the pavilion end, we were like, we reckon that's Steve Smith. That's Cameron Bancroft with him. Fuck, Cameron Bancroft's coming to do the press conference. Where's Steve Smith? What's going on? And they slowly got up to the stairs, and I streamed it on a platform that no longer exists. I live streamed it onto Twitter via an intermediary, and the questions started coming in. Some of them were to the point. Some of them were a bit more circuitous, but either way, it gave Smith the chance to almost make it worse. Well, not almost. He did make it worse because they confected a lie about the bat tape, didn't they? Yeah. And they said it was sticky tape. And Bancroft was thrown totally under the bus at the time. When the question was asked what had happened, Smith deferred to Bancroft initially. Bancroft talked about, I don't know exact frame of words, but he was trying to basically allege that he made a massive mistake and and it was bat tape, as it was later put to me. They came up with that when watching the tape. They realised they were screwed, and they had to find something in the room that looked the same colour. And they're like, there's some bat tape. Wow. So that was how they happened upon it.
It's the cover-up. It's always the cover-up.
It was made so much worse for the cover-up. Had they fronted up that night, it was still going to be bad. I declared in the press box that night when I went back in there after the thing, Steve Smith will never captain Australia again. I wasn't right, because he obviously has. But, my feeling of the story, my instinct of the story was correct, that this was going to be big deal.
Yeah.
So Smith did, as we know, get suspended with Warner. The next morning, coming back to this Nathan Lyon story though, we arrived at the ground and we still didn't really know an awful lot because there was no public comment. James Sutherland had done a press conference in Australia, the chief executive, and I don't know what Sutherland said, but it was fairly strong words for an administrator. But the team itself hadn't said anything since. Then we got a statement from the ICC saying that, Smith and Bancroft had both been charged. Warner hadn't. But when we got there that morning, we were told that Smith wouldn't captain the next test match or something like that, and that they would be going home. So we learnt all of this when we got to work the next day, that Smith, Bancroft and Warner were going home at the conclusion of the test match, which was like, whoa, fuck me. It's like huge.
That's huge.
Deal.
It's absolutely massive.
Massive deal. And then, of course, the story gets more expansive as we go, and we learn the day after the test match was over, when we were all holed out the front of the hotel room, when Chris Barrett, who was on the great news hound on that tour, but always found out that it was alleged that Warner was the ringleader of whatever was going on.
Because you wouldn't have known that in the time.
I mean, people had said it, but they were saying it ill-informed. They were saying it because they just felt it.
Yeah,
might have been Warner. This gave more veracity to that suggestion. And of course, well, not of course, what we did next was we travelled on what was day 7 of the test match day 6 of the test match later in the day that's right, the test finished in 4. So day 5 was the day at the hotel, day 6 we travelled, and by day 7, when we were basically living out of the hotel foyer in Johannesburg, when the statement came through talking about the bans and also saying it was Sandpaper. And what we later learned to be a fairly botched investigation, it was total, like, whoever was about to give evidence and not everyone gave evidence, and it was all a bit shambolic. But that was where they landed, and the rest is history. In the middle of all of that, Nathan Lyon picked up his 300th Test wicket on the Sunday morning.
I've forgotten that.
Kaisa Rabada, who was a big part of the series and so on, stumped by Payne from the bowling of Lyon. Lyon had absolutely dominated when he played away from home in Bangladesh in 17. It was his year of years. He took 62 wickets at 21 in 2017 from memory, including the 8 for in Bangalore, dominating. Do
you think that was about the first time that he was really given the proper plaudits? Because I think it always felt like it took longer for Nathan Lyon to be recognised as a really great bowler.
At the end of 2016, he was set to be dropped. If not for Steve O'Keefe tearing his calf right then, there was a decent chance Lyon would have been dropped for the 6th Test match of that summer, which was the last against Pakistan. As it turned out, Lyon bowled beautifully that day at Melbourne, and things moved on. But O'Keefe was injured, so it was a moot point. But you're right, it did take until around this time when Lyon set himself apart. It took, not many cricketers get beyond 250 wickets with people still doubting their spot in the team every week.
I mean, when you think about Crabb Swan was the finest off spinner England ever had. He didn't get anywhere near 300
258,
wickets.
I think he finished with. So, Lyon gets Rabada stumped by Payne, who by the end of that day would be the Australian captain.
Yes.
In fact, did Payne captain on field on that day? I think he might have. I think Payne took over. With Smith and Warner relieved of their duties, Payne took over and captained that day. That's right. That's how it went. So he became the 6th Australian to pass 300th Test wickets in that Test match. And Lyon tried to maintain his pride when talking about it after play, but gosh, it was rugged. It was rugged. And he goes on to pass any number of milestones in far happier circumstances. 350 was that outstanding 6 he took on the final day at Edgbaston in 2019. Ben Stokes, again, was the keeping of Tim Payne, caught behind, great bit of bowling. Lyon passes 350 on the day when he bowls Australia to a 1-0 Ashes winning lead. 400 was David Malan on the day when Australia won another Test match to go up 1-0 in an Ashes at Brisbane in 2021. David Malan was caught at short leg. It might have been silly point. Either way, close to the wicket when Lyon had to spend the better part of 12 months on 399. So they lost to India at the Gabba. Lyon didn't take wickets on the final day, was marooned on 399, no away series in 2021.
COVID.
And then with COVID and all of that, and finally got there in the second innings of that match and overcame that hurdle. 450 was Alzari Joseph in Adelaide in 2022, which is neither here nor there. 500 was Fahim Ashraf, which I wasn't commentating on, but I was in the commentary box when Adam White did a lovely job of us on SEN when he was leg before wicket. It went upstairs. It was one of those delayed response ones, but Lyon got the technology right and went past 500 Test wickets there when he returned to the Test team, having been injured in England earlier that year. That was his first Test back, having been injured, and who knows how that series in 23 would have played out had Lyon been available for more than 1.5 Test matches.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been as exciting, I don't think.
Quite, yeah. And wicket 550, which I did do, was Dinesh Chandimal, who was caught by Bo Webster from bowling of Lyon at Gaul only a couple of months ago. So Lyon has really motored through. Going back to some earlier milestones, I'll just finish off by doing some earlier milestones. His 50th Test wicket was in a really bad day for Lyon. He took 3 for 49 from 50 overs, I reckon, bowling in the second innings at Adelaide. Duplessis batting through the whole
game.
Taboo. That was the time when Nathan Lyon was really being questioned for what he could do.
It's a bloody long time ago as well, isn't it?
Too right it is. It's a few months after the 2012 Olympics.
Jacques Rudolph.
And then wicket 100, I remember well, I was in the members at Melbourne with a couple of mates, Ben Slater and Dan Hearn, who were out from England, old teammates of mine, and we were there watching Lyon pick up Stuart Broad, caught it slip. Michael Clarke was there, and that was a cause for celebration too, as Lyon went on to take, I think, 6 for 60, I think it was, in the second innings of that match to turn around a first innings deficit, and Australia duly won that Test the following day. And then wicket 200 was Danny de Silva, not quite so good there either, in a loss at Candy in 2016. So get a sense there of the milestone wickets reflect where Lyon was at different points of his career and the fact that he's still going strong now. And you ask about 700, yes, absolutely in the frame. He's now in the 550s. He wants to play until Australia tour England here in 2027. He wants another crack at India in India. That's a lot of Test cricket. And it starts at the World Test Championship only a couple of months from now. Well, it's a month and a half from now. And he'll go on that run. 1 for the World Test Championship, 3 in the Windies, 5 against England. Then next year they play an away series in South Africa in the middle of the year, maybe October. They play a couple of tests against Bangladesh in the middle of the year, in Australia in the top end. Then they've got a test summer that includes 4 against New Zealand, then 5 in India in the Aussie summer.
No, that's lovely,
weird
isn't
as
it?
that is.
Yeah.
Weird as that is. They go straight from a New Zealand series to an India away, to the Sesquicentenary Test match in 27, to 5 Ashes Test matches in England in the middle of 27, and potentially another World Test Championship final if they make the top 2 of the next cycle. So you're doing the maths there. That's a shitload of Test cricket.
Yeah.
So if Lyon goes all the way through to then, it'd be more surprising if he didn't get another 140-odd Test wickets.
It would, wouldn't it?
There you go.
Yeah.
So for Andrew Pelechaty, that's 300 for Lyon, but many other bits and bobs as well. And you know what, Daniel, you got one more thought before we pull the pin here.
Well, what this is just that, we were talking earlier about run-outs and Andy Zoltzman. Well, he's come back to me with a subsidiary little fact.
Oh, that's nice.
Just to finish off. Because he's pointed out that Cook was only run out once in 291 innings. And then he goes, according to Sampson's database, Andrew Sampson, most consecutive first-class dismissals before being run out from the start of a career. Okay, so we had Mullaney, had an entire career,
or something like that,
the record. Yeah. James Whittaker, 349 before he was run out. Mullaney, 292 is his entire career. Cook, 285. That Kolkata run out was his first in first-class cricket.
Oh, right.
In the Test match. So we'd gone 285 innings without being run out. Pataudi Jr., 245. Courtney Walsh didn't last long enough to be run out, 242. And Kapil Dev, 234.
Well, there you go, James Whittaker of that 86-87 team you were talking about before, and who we were talking about, Leicestershire on the weekly show, of course, a legend there too. So these things have a way of coming full circle. It's been terrific spending the day on your sofa, Daniel. I've enjoyed it immensely. You know what? It's just what I've needed, coming here and spending some time with you. So I'll go back to the other side of London now and collect my daughters and get on with life and publish these episodes, and away we go from there. You'll no doubt be back on Storytime very soon. In fact, I would imagine you'll end up doing almost every daily episode of the India-England series that'll come up. Are you doing the Zimbabwe test for TMS?
I'm not doing Zimbabwe test.
Well, we'll be doing dailies from that World Test Championship final. I expect you'll be working with me, so it'll be you and me doing a bit of that. And then we'll get into that England-India series where you'll be a busy boy and all over the Final Word feeds in the usual way.
Lovely.
And then we'll have the 18th of August game where our podcasts come together, which will be lovely.
Worlds are colliding, Jerry. Worlds are colliding.
The Lord's Taverners are the charity that we work with for that, and we're very proud of it. Thank you to our partners. Thank you to our patrons. Patreon.com/The Final Word. I didn't mention before, you also get the ad-free feed, so you don't have to listen to the 30-second insertions. That's a benefit of being a patron. We give you that link, and you can log on accordingly, and it means that we can keep doing what we are doing week in, week out on The Final Word. All that's left for me to say is have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.